Who makes my heart beat like thunder?
From Elvis to Eminem, musicians have shaped our culture and touched our hearts. But behind the glitz and glamour, some artists harbor dark secrets, controversial beliefs, and troubling legacies that many would rather forget. Let's explore the shocking truth behind the music with 20 shocking musicians with dark legacies. 1. Shaky Jake Harris. Blues music has always been about unity and shared human experiences, but legendary bluesman Shaky Jake Harris had a different perspective. Known for his masterful harmonica playing and compelling storytelling, Harris's legacy is tainted by his xenophobic views toward non-American musicians. Throughout his career, Harris vocally opposed foreign artists performing blues music, claiming they were stealing an American art form. His particular disdain for European musicians was well documented in numerous interviews where he dismissed their contributions regardless of talent or dedication to the genre. Harris's stance went beyond mere preference. He actively refused collaborations with international artists and publicly denounced their attempts to participate in blues culture. 2. Paul Whiteman. In the early 1900s, Paul Whiteman earned the title King of Jazz, but his crown came at a devastating cost to the genre's true pioneers. Whiteman's success story is one of cultural appropriation and whitewashing, as he presented a sanitized version of jazz to white audiences while suppressing its African-American roots. His refined interpretations stripped away the raw emotional essence that defined authentic jazz. While innovators like Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington were revolutionizing the genre, Whiteman received disproportionate acclaim and recognition. Though he never explicitly excluded black musicians from his orchestra, his passive approach to inclusion and dismissive attitudes toward traditional jazz styles revealed his true colors. 3. Jimmy Driftwood. Jimmy Driftwood's 1959 hit The Battle of New Orleans cemented his place in American folk music history. However, beneath the surface of his historically themed songs lay troubling undertones of racial superiority. While celebrated for preserving American folklore through music, many of his compositions perpetuated harmful stereotypes and racist narratives that were common in his era, but remain problematic today. His influence on folk music is undeniable, but his legacy serves as a reminder that even beloved cultural figures can contribute to harmful social narratives. The contrast between his musical achievements and controversial beliefs highlights the complex nature of examining historical figures through a modern lens. Behind Driftwood's toe-tapping folk tunes lay a darker narrative that many fans never noticed. His songs about Native Americans and Black Americans often contained subtle but harmful stereotypes. While chronicling westward expansion and manifest destiny, Driftwood's lyrics consistently portrayed indigenous peoples as mere obstacles rather than victims of a brutal colonization. His musical storytelling painted white settlers as heroic pioneers, while diminishing the devastating impact on Native American communities. This wasn't just artistic interpretation. Driftwood's personal views aligned with segregationists during the Civil Rights Movement. Though he never openly promoted hatred, his silence on equality spoke volumes. The combination of his passive stance on civil rights and his romanticized storytelling helped perpetuate a sanitized version of American history. While his contributions to folk music remain significant, his legacy carries the weight of historical revisionism that continues to influence perceptions today. 4. Arthur Collins. The early 1900s recording industry has a particularly dark chapter, and Arthur Collins stands at its center. Known for his powerful, crystal-clear voice, Collins built his career on some of the most openly racist content in American musical history. His recordings weren't just problematic by today's standards, they were deliberately cruel, even for their time. Collins's repertoire included songs filled with racial slurs and degrading stereotypes about Black Americans. His most popular hits, including The Preacher and the Bear and All Coons Look Alike to Me, earned him fortune and fame while reinforcing harmful racial prejudices. These weren't just entertainment, they became tools for justifying systematic racism in everyday society. Perhaps most disturbingly, Collins's recordings became staples in minstrel shows where white performers in blackface mockingly caricatured Black life and culture. His influence extended beyond mere entertainment, helping cement racist ideologies into mainstream American culture. While his recordings are rarely heard today, the damaging impact of his work on American society's racial attitudes persisted for generations. 5. Lemi Kilmister. Lemmi Kilmister, the iconic frontman of Motorhead, helped shape heavy metal with his aggressive playing style and rebellious persona. However, his extensive collection of Nazi memorabilia and controversial comments cast a dark shadow over his legacy. Behind the leather-clad, whiskey-drinking image lay a disturbing fascination that made many fans uncomfortable. Lemmi's collection included SSS uniforms, Nazi medals, swastika-covered artwork, and various Third Reich artifacts. When questioned about these items, he dismissed concerns by claiming it was merely historical interest. However, his casual attitude toward Nazi imagery and questionable comments suggested otherwise. In interviews, he notoriously remarked that the bad guys always had the best uniforms and made light of the Nazi regime's atrocities. While Lemmi consistently denied being a Nazi sympathizer, his apparent inability to recognize the weight of his historical hobby troubled many. Unlike others in the music industry who made explicitly racist statements, Lemmi's controversy stemmed from his seemingly cavalier attitude towards symbols representing humanity's darkest chapter. 6. Pat Boone. Pat Boone emerged as one of the 1950s biggest pop stars, but his success came with a troubling backstory. Rather than creating original music, Boone built his career by covering R&B and rock and roll songs originally performed by black artists, often without proper acknowledgement or compensation. While pioneers like Little Richard and Fats Domino were revolutionizing music with their dynamic, soulful performances, Boone offered sanitized versions that appealed to mainstream white audiences. His recordings of Tutti Frutti and Ain't That a Shame outperformed the originals, reinforcing racial barriers in the music industry. Boone strategically positioned himself as the clean-cut alternative to black musicians, catering to conservative, pro-segregation audiences. His success exemplified the industry's systematic marginalization of black artists, and his later dismissive comments about racial inequality only solidified his controversial legacy. 7. Eric Clapton, the guitar god's racist tirade. Eric Clapton's guitar virtuosity earned him legendary status, but a shocking incident in 1976 revealed a darker side of the rock icon. During a concert, an intoxicated Clapton launched into a racist rant supporting Enoch Powell, a British politician known for his anti-immigrant stance. The guitarist's outburst included racial slurs, demands for foreigners to leave the UK, and warnings about England becoming a black colony. His words weren't just offensive, they actively contributed to racial tensions in a nation already struggling with immigration issues. Despite immediate backlash from fans and fellow musicians, Clapton remained unapologetic for years, dismissing criticism as mere political correctness. Even decades later, Clapton's controversial statements continued, suggesting his 1976 outburst wasn't merely an alcohol-fueled mistake, but reflected deeper-held beliefs. This persistent controversy serves as a reminder that even the most celebrated musicians can harbor troubling viewpoints that tarnish their artistic legacy. Eric Clapton's guitar mastery made him a legend, but his legacy carries a troubling stain that many fans struggle to reconcile. When confronted about his racist statements, Clapton often played the victim, attempting to deflect criticism rather than addressing the harm his words caused. While his musical contributions to rock history are undeniable, his past actions cast a long shadow over his reputation. Some defenders argue he was simply another reckless rock star under the influence, but others see his words as revelations of deeper-seated beliefs. Either way, his racist outbursts remain among rock history's most disturbing moments, forcing fans to grapple with the contradiction between his artistic brilliance and personal views. 8. Ted Nugent. Ted Nugent's career has become as defined by his extreme right-wing and racist rhetoric as his guitar-shredding abilities. Throughout his career, Nugent has consistently made offensive comments about race, particularly targeting Black and Native American communities. His use of racial slurs in interviews, dismissal of marginalized groups' struggles, and alignment with white nationalist ideology have created a toxic legacy. His inflammatory statements about minorities and immigrants have often verged on inciting violence. Perhaps most notoriously, he referred to former President Barack Obama as a subhuman mongrel, terminology historically associated with white supremacists. Nugent has also repeatedly mocked indigenous cultures and minimized the historical trauma of Native Americans, making light of reservations and tribal sovereignty. 9. Al Jolson. Once hailed as the world's greatest entertainer, Al Jolson's legacy is now inseparable from his role in popularizing blackface in American entertainment. His performances didn't just participate in a racist tradition, they actively promoted and normalized it for decades to come. Jolson's most infamous moment came in The Jazz Singer, 1927, the first feature-length film with synchronized sound. While technically groundbreaking, the film's pivotal scene featured Jolson in full blackface, creating one of cinema's most controversial moments. Though he reportedly supported black artists privately, his public persona actively perpetuated racial mockery, helping extend blackface entertainment's cultural influence far beyond its natural expiration date. 10. Stephen Foster. While his name might not be instantly recognizable, Stephen Foster's music is deeply embedded in American culture. As the composer of classics like Oh Susanna and Camptown Races, Foster helped shape American folk music. However, his legacy is complicated by the fact that many of his compositions were specifically written for minstrel shows where white performers in blackface would mock and caricature black Americans through exaggerated dialects and degrading stereotypes. Stephen Foster's influence on American music is undeniable, but his legacy carries a deeply troubling shadow. His compositions, while melodically memorable, were intrinsically linked to racist minstrel shows and helped perpetuate harmful stereotypes that would impact generations to come. Foster's music provided the soundtrack for degrading entertainment that mocked black Americans. His lyrics frequently portrayed black people as simple-minded, childlike characters who were content with their enslaved status. Old Folks at Home, one of his most successful works, particularly exemplified this problem by presenting a romanticized view of plantation life from the perspective of an enslaved person longing for their days in bondage. The song's popularity was so widespread that it remained Florida's official state song for many years. 11. John Philip Souza. Behind the patriotic fanfare and beloved 4th of July celebrations lies a darker aspect of John Philip Sousa's career. While Stars and Stripes Forever and the Washington Post March made him a household name, his active promotion and support of racist minstrel shows reveals a troubling side of his legacy. Sousa wasn't merely a passive participant in this degrading form of entertainment. He actively composed music for blackface performances and helped normalize their presence in American culture. His enthusiasm for minstrel shows extended beyond mere business decisions. He genuinely believed they represented an important part of American cultural expression. Even more concerning was his response to the emergence of black musicians in classical music. As jazz and blues gained popularity, Sousa publicly dismissed these genres as inferior forms of musical expression, reinforcing racist attitudes about black creativity and artistry. While modern celebrations continue to feature his marches, this problematic aspect of his career often goes unmentioned in historical discussions. 12. Biff Rose. The story of Biff Rose represents one of music's most dramatic falls from grace. Once celebrated alongside icons like Bob Dylan and Randy Newman, Rose's later years revealed deeply disturbing beliefs that shocked his former admirers. His transformation from a quirky, humorous folk musician to an outspoken promoter of racism and anti-Semitism left fans and colleagues stunned. Rose's social media presence became a platform for hateful conspiracy theories, racist rhetoric, and anti-Semitic propaganda. His public statements grew increasingly extreme, leading to former collaborators and friends distancing themselves from him. Rose actively mocked civil rights movements, dismissed efforts toward racial equality as mere political correctness, and regularly posted inflammatory content targeting various ethnic and religious groups. His descent from respected artists to controversial figures serves as a sobering reminder of how personal beliefs can tarnish artistic legacy. 13. Earl Scruggs. Earl Scruggs revolutionized bluegrass music with his lightning-fast banjo picking, forever changing the sound of country music. As one half of the legendary duo Flatt and Scruggs, he created timeless hits like Foggy Mountain Breakdown. However, beneath his musical genius lay a troubling connection to the era's deep-rooted racial divisions. During the civil rights movement, while artists like Johnny Cash and Bob Dylan boldly stood for racial equality, Scruggs maintained a conspicuous silence. His ties to Southern conservative ideals, particularly regarding segregation, became increasingly apparent as he regularly performed at events where racial separation was strictly enforced. Though he never made explicitly racist statements, his passive acceptance of segregation spoke volumes about his stance. 14. Lee Scratch Perry. Lee Scratch Perry's innovative production techniques helped shape dub and reggae music, working with legends like Bob Marley and revolutionizing the industry. But his later years revealed a disturbing side as he repeatedly launched into anti-Semitic tirades that shocked his fan base. Perry's statements weren't subtle misunderstandings, they were direct, hateful attacks. He publicly blamed Jewish people for the world's problems, labeled them as vampires, and spread wild conspiracy theories about their supposed control over the music industry. The contrast between his spiritual preachings about love and unity and his targeted hatred toward Jewish people created a puzzling dichotomy that tainted his legacy. 15. Spade Coulie. Spade Coolie's story takes an even darker turn. Known as the King of Western Swing and a talented fiddler who achieved Hollywood stardom, Coolie's legacy is marked not only by racism, but by horrific violence. His support for segregation and mockery of black musicians paled in comparison to his most heinous act, the brutal murder of his wife. In 1961, suspecting his wife of infidelity, Coulie tortured and beat her to death in front of their child. The trial revealed his cold-blooded nature as he showed no remorse for his actions. His conviction and life sentence marked a shocking end to a career that had once symbolized the glamour of Western swing music, leaving fans to grapple with the devastating reality of their idol's true nature. Coolie's story took an unexpected turn after his conviction. In a strange twist of fate, he was granted parole in 1969, but destiny had other plans. Before he could taste freedom, a heart attack claimed his life, serving as a grim reminder that talent doesn't shield anyone from the consequences of their actions. 16. Hank Williams Sr. Behind the legendary voice that shaped American music forever, Hank Williams Sr. SS' legacy carries the weight of racial division. His timeless hits like Your Cheating Heart and I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry made him a country music icon, but his career was marked by problematic attitudes toward racial equality. Growing up in the Deep South during an era of strict segregation, Williams did little to challenge the status quo. He regularly performed at segregated venues and showed no interest in supporting or collaborating with black artists, despite his music heavily drawing from blues influences. Rather than acknowledge these inspirations, he maintained the racial barriers of his time. Historians have noted that while Williams benefited from black musical styles, he actively participated in keeping black artists marginalized. Private recordings and personal statements allegedly revealed racist language, suggesting he viewed country music as an exclusively white domain. Unlike contemporaries such as Johnny Cash and Willie Nelson, who eventually worked to bridge racial divides, Williams remained firmly entrenched in segregationist attitudes. 17. Elvis Presley. The King of Rock and Roll's crown sits uneasily when examining his complex relationship with race and music. While Elvis Presley revolutionized popular culture, his success story is inseparable from accusations of cultural appropriation and racial inequality. Elvis built his sound on the foundation of black musical traditions, particularly gospel and blues. However, while black artists struggled for recognition, Elvis received unprecedented fame, fortune, and mainstream acceptance. His version of Big Mama Thornton's Hound Dog exemplifies this dynamic. While the original struggled for airplay, Elvis's cover became a national sensation. Perhaps most damaging to his legacy was an alleged quote where Elvis supposedly stated, "The only thing a Negro can do for me is buy my records and shine my shoes." While historians debate the quote's authenticity, it became emblematic of broader concerns about his relationship with race. Despite maintaining friendships with black musicians like B.B. King, Elvis's success coincided with the systematic exclusion of black artists from the mainstream music industry, a system he never publicly challenged. 18. Richard Wagner. Wagner's influence on classical music is undeniable, but his compositions carried more than just musical innovation. His work became intrinsically linked with one of history's darkest political ideologies, casting a long shadow over his artistic achievements. Richard Wagner's musical genius is undeniable. His operas like The Ring Cycle and Tristan und Isolde revolutionized classical music. However, his deeply rooted anti-Semitism cast a sinister shadow that would later influence one of history's darkest chapters. Wagner wasn't content to merely harbor prejudices. He actively promoted them through his infamous essay, Das Judentum in der Musik, Jewishness in Music. This venomous piece argued that Jewish composers were incapable of true artistic creation and claimed claimed their influence was corrupting German music. His anti-Semitic writings went beyond mere criticism. They called for the complete removal of Jewish influence from German culture. Decades after Wagner's death, his ideology found a terrifying new champion in Adolf Hitler. The Nazi regime embraced Wagner's music and anti-Semitic philosophy, transforming his operas into propaganda tools. His compositions became the soundtrack for Nazi rallies, and even played in concentration camps, forever linking his artistic legacy to the Holocaust. 19. Ian Stewart Donaldson. While some musicians made controversial statements, Ian Stewart Donaldson built an entire career promoting white supremacy. As frontman of Screwdriver, he transformed what began as a typical punk band into the most notorious white power group in history. Through his music, Donaldson didn't just express racist views, he actively recruited for neo-Nazi movements. His concerts became rallying points for extremists, with audiences openly displaying Nazi salutes. The band's infamous song, White Power, became an anthem for racist groups worldwide, while their record label, White Noise Records, grew into a major distributor of hate music. Donaldson's influence extended beyond music. He worked closely with far-right organizations to spread white supremacist ideology. Even after his death in 1993, his toxic legacy continues through white nationalist gatherings where his songs still echo. 20. Johnny Rebel. Born Clifford Joseph Trahan, Johnny Rebel crossed every line of decency with music deliberately crafted to spread white supremacist propaganda. His 1960s recordings weren't just politically incorrect, they were filled with racial slurs, celebrations of the Ku Klux Klan, and calls for continued segregation. His songs were so overtly racist that mainstream stores refused to stock them, yet they found an eager audience in white supremacist circles. His music became a staple at KKK rallies, with lyrics too offensive to quote directly. Unlike artists who later expressed regret for controversial statements, Johnny Rebel remained committed to his message of hate, creating a legacy that continues to influence racist groups today. Unlike some artists who later expressed regret for controversial statements, Johnny Rebel stood firmly behind his hateful message until the end. In numerous interviews throughout his career, he defended his racist music, claiming he was merely expressing what many Southerners believed at the time. His unapologetic stance made his legacy even more disturbing. When confronted about the harmful impact of his songs, Rebel would often dismiss criticism, showing no remorse for the pain and division his music caused. Even as society progressed and racial attitudes evolved, he remained steadfast in his racist ideology. His death in 2016 didn't end his toxic influence. His recordings continued to circulate on far-right websites and forums, spreading hatred to new generations. What makes Rebel's legacy particularly dangerous is the calculated nature of his work. His songs weren't just casual expressions of prejudice. They were deliberately crafted to dehumanize, divide, and incite hatred. Each lyric was purposefully written to maximize its harmful impact, making him one of the most deliberately malicious figures in music history. And that concludes our deep dive into music's darkest legacies. These stories remind us that even beloved artists can harbor shocking secrets and dangerous beliefs. If you want more revelations about the music industry's hidden history, hit like, subscribe, and stay tuned for our next video. The truth behind your favorite songs might surprise you.